All right, in this video, we are going to get the Avantis to be fed by Pro Tools via MADI here at NESCom. So first thing to say is that the Avantis only works at 96 kilohertz, which means you want to make sure your Pro Tools session feeding the Avantis through the MADI card is at 96K. And here at NESCom, most of our mix labs are actually at 48K. So hopefully I will set up your mix lab so it is at 96K. But if you do have a file that there's a question mark about it, I would go to Setup Session, just Command 2, and make sure your sample rate is indeed at 96K. And if you're starting fresh, of course, make a session at 96K. How do you make a session that's 96K that's already at 48? In Pro Tools, go File, Save, Copy In. And here, make sure you click All Audio Files and pick 96K from something else. So if you got to convert a session, that's how you do it. Then you save it, it'll ask you to name it, and then you'll have to close the current session and reopen the converted version. All right, so here we are with a 96 kilohertz session. We're going to set it up to drive MADI over to the console. Things that are already working. The Pro Tools rig is already working. Its playback engine, I should have started there. Its playback engine is set to HD native Thunderbolt. That's working correctly. And if you go to hardware, you can see the HD MADI interface. And just so you know what's going on, we've got this nice rack here, and there is the HD native, and there is an HD MADI interface. So that's what we're going to be patching over to the Avantis. So everything is set up. We are going to do the I/O here. I know I show this in other videos, but it won't hurt to show it one more time. You're going to open the I/O. If you see anything, you're starting fresh, and you see anything in your I/O, like I'm seeing here on the input, output, and bus tabs, I would delete all that so you're starting fresh and you don't have another student's patches to mess you up. How you would do that, I'd hold Option down and click one of these. That selects all. They're all blue. I'm going to hit delete and clear it out. Doing the same for outputs, there's another way to select all. Collect one and hit Command A. It selects all. Hit delete. They're gone. And then buses, do the same with buses if you have them. Now go back around through the tabs and hit the default. Do start with the default format on stereo down there. If they're set to mono, you can run into some issues. So make sure that's set to stereo. Hit default ins. Same thing, default stereo outs. And your buses, even though there's some there, to hit default, it'll add all your buses. So with that set, you should have your I/O ready. That's pretty much the same for most classwork anyway, across all the classes. Hitting OK. Let's go to the mixer view here. You're going to want to select all your channels. To do that, hold Option down on the keyboard and select a track. All the tracks turn out white. That means they're selected. Now, hold the bear claw, which is Command, Option, Shift, and go to the first channel and set its output to the mono MADI 1. Not stereo, that'll mess you up. Make sure you're starting with mono 1. It cascades all the outputs. They're all now going from 1 to whatever it is, 24, 36, how many tracks you have. So it's all ready to go here. I'm just going to loop it, put it on play, so once we get the console working, we'll see some meters dancing. So with that said, the next thing is it's coming out of the HD MADI and going through a MADI cable to console. Let's look behind the rack. This is pretty simple, but here's the HD MADI, and there is one thing that's confusing is that there is a MADI coax 1 set of ports and a MADI coax 2 ports. You want to use MADI coax 1. Out is going to go to in on the Avantis, and the Avantis out is going to come back in to this input here. Now, it might be a little hard to see with the light there, but there's the out and the in, and you can see I'm using a yellow and red cable, which is irrelevant, but you'll see once we get up to the console that the out is feeding the in and the in is feeding out. Let me slide by, excuse me. So here on top here of the Avantis, this is the MADI card. It does have a lot of connectors. The ones on the far left here, which are labeled Link 1, the lighting's a little poor there, that is, that's the one you want to connect to. These others have other purposes. And so you can, the top is the out going back to Pro Tools, and the bottom on the yellow is in. And look at that nice flashing light. That's really useful. That tells you that it's receiving a MADI signal. If I unplug it from the console, something should happen. See, it's red. It's saying, yo, I don't have any MADI. So that's always a good sign. If you, that's a good troubleshooting help for you if you're trying to figure things out, that if you see a flashing orange, that you are indeed seeing it from the Pro Tools rig. Cool. Well, that's set up. We're on to the console. The console's the easy part. We just want to patch. I've got a generic Pro Tools session here, not Pro Tools, a generic Avantis file setup, and we're just going to patch MADI into the inputs. So go to I/O, and we're dealing with inputs, so pick the input tab. And on this particular console, we have that card, that MADI card, in the top slot, which is called I/O port 1. And so I'm going to patch my I/O port 1 inputs coming from console, sends it from MADI into inputs receiving on the channels here. So I'm going to hold the patch down, and 1 from Pro Tools is going to input 1 on the console, 2, etc. And you can even do this, which is nice. And if that's difficult, you can even zoom in, which is nice. But you can see you could patch as many as you need. But as you can see here, the meters are dancing, so it's all working. There is one last thing to talk about, and that is sync. How is sync worked out? Console's at 96K, Pro Tools at 96K, but who is the leader, who's the follower, that sort of thing. What we do here at NESCom is we make the console the leader, and we make the Pro Tools rig the follower. So go back to Pro Tools and confirm our sync is correct. We're going to go back to that window I showed earlier when we were looking at sample rate, which is setup session, or command 2. And you want to set your clock source here, clock source, to be set as it actually is, MADI in. So it's receiving the MADI in signal coming back from the console, and it's clocking to it. So the Pro Tools rig is therefore following the Avantis. So that's what we do here most of the time. And, oops, I just broke it. So let's put it right back. HD MADI, MADI in. There you go. Sync source is now valid. Fantastic. End of video.